All right, everybody, welcome back to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am Jesse Collings. I'm here, as always, with my co host, Jason Ounpraseuth. And welcome to our first episode of 2021. It's been a few weeks since we were recorded. Thankfully, nothing has happened since then. There's been no major news. Nothing in America is any different than it was. It's basically like we never left. How's it going, Jason?
Yeah, it's going well. Obviously, yeah, it's been a hectic week, but hopefully, yeah, this provides a good distraction for people out there. Obviously, yeah, a lot's been going on, uh, but some positive things as well. And just the optimist in me is just trying to look at the bright side of things, for now at least.
And if you are want to look at the bright side of things, a place you can definitely look, especially this week, is professional wrestling. Jason, what a great week for professional wrestling this was. I know it was a bad week for pretty much everything else in society, but for professional wrestling, if you just look at what we've seen since Monday, we got two excellent nights of Wrestle Kingdom. Then we got an excellent episode of AEW Dynamite with a major angle, and we also got an excellent episode of NXT. And I'm not even counting stuff I haven't seen, like the MLW show, the All Japan show from January 3rd that I haven't seen yet. There's probably 1,000 other wrestling things I've missed, but I can't remember a week where we got such great wrestling from such a variety of places. So, as bad as things have been and as tenuous and as dramatic as things have been this week in America, for wrestling, things have been kind of great. And I don't want to downplay anything that's happening in real society, in the real world, but in our little wrestling bubble, this was a fantastic week.
Well, I will say it's 99% great. There was that Goldberg thing on Raw that was a bummer. And so I will say 99% of things have been great this week. That percent was really bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's their Legends Night. So what I heard, well, by the way, we're going to talk a lot about New Japan in this podcast, but real quick because you brought that up. So Goldberg comes out at the end of Raw, and his promo is literally insane because his promo is like, "You, Drew McIntyre, you don't respect the legends. I'm gonna kick your ass, you young punk." Like this, which would make sense if he said that to Randy Orton, who had been
Yeah.
basically terrorizing the legends all night and had cut these promos against them. Instead, he said it to Drew McIntyre, who about an hour previously was talking about how much of a hero Hulk Hogan was to him and was cutting Hulk a promo in the ring with Hulk Hogan and was, for all I know, best friends with Hulk Hogan. And
Hmm.
not only that, but a few months before, and I know it's impossible to remember WWE's creative process and what has happened only a few months ago feels like years ago. But a few months ago, Drew McIntyre was in the main event of a pay per view where the entire angle was that he was teaming up with all these legends like Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair to and Big Show to beat Randy Orton in the main event. Like nobody in this company has shown more respect to legends than Drew McIntyre. And I just wow. Like I know I should not be never be impressed by WWE's like ridiculous creative process and the decision making and the scripting of the promos and how they come up with these angles, but that was a real stunner just how nonsensical that was because it wasn't just that it didn't make sense and that Goldberg was wrong. It was just the complete
Hmm.
opposite of what happened.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would not be surprised. I mean, I haven't checked out, on the tidbits and the Observer this week, but I would not be surprised. Hey, Goldberg, in his own imagination, came out with that promo himself, and it's like, hey, Vince, this is gonna be a great angle. This could be a Goldberg thing for all we know.
Well, to be fair, I think Goldberg has been able to. I don't know if he's writing his own promos, but he's had more levity in his promos than you can
Yeah,
tell.
exactly.
And it's obvious because Goldberg is actually one of the better promos in the company, which
Sure.
is hilarious because in his prime, Goldberg was basically a non starter as a promo. But it goes
Hmm.
to show how bad the scripted promos are. That someone who just shows up and kind of sounds real and just says, like, "Hey, I'm going to kick your ass." It's like, oh man, great promo. This guy's awesome. Um, but moving on from that, we're here to talk about New Japan, which had a much better week than WWE as far as quality goes. So this isn't going to be a real Wrestle Kingdom review show. I published a review. You can check it out on my Twitter of Wrestle
Mhm.
Kingdom, both night 1 and night 2, up on WrestlingInc.com. And so if people want to get like my full thoughts, if people really want my thoughts on like the King of Pro Wrestling 4-way match, that's where they're gonna be. But what we'll kind of talk about here is more of a kind of a recap of 2019 2020 for New Japan, and then kind of taking what we've seen so far in 2021, which would be the 2 Wrestle Kingdom shows and what we saw from New Japan Dash, and kind of talk about the direction the company is heading in 2021. And the first thing I kind of want to talk to is I didn't like really. I thought 2020 was kind of a bad year for New Japan, and I thought that they were relying on too much of this consistent heel shenanigans, which has always been a problem for New Japan. But with Evil, winning the IWGP Championship and having suddenly all these world title matches involve a ton of interference and a lot of Dick Togo and all this Bullet Club nonsense, it really took the wind out of the sails of New Japan in a lot of ways. I thought that, obviously things like the clap crowds not being able to have full attendance, that obviously hurts as well. So I was kind of coming into Wrestle Kingdom not being I was probably lower on New Japan than I had been in a really long time. I wasn't as excited for the shows as I had been in previous years, which is a pretty high bar because they put together some awesome cards that I think a lot of people were really excited for. But I thought both nights were excellent, and I feel with Kota Ibushi winning the double titles and having 2 excellent main event matches, I'm back. I'm back on the bandwagon. I'm like 2021 is going to be great for New Japan. Jason, how did you feel kind of with 2020 ending for New Japan, and then also has it changed at all since you saw what happened at Wrestle Kingdom?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think a bit more positive than you were on New Japan 2020. The interference stuff, just to me personally, didn't bother me that much. I like trying to defend it. Like I understand, like it might not have vibed yourself and a bunch of other people. I'm not just here to argue against that. Like it just for me personally, it didn't bother me that much, just for me. But yeah, definitely a down year compared to their 2019. It started off well, of course, with Naito winning titles at first, and then John Moxley, Suzuki. That was a great match at the beginning here, but then obviously the pandemic hit, and then obviously it hit not only just New Japan but other companies as well. But even then, like Okada had a very strange summer as well, where like it was kind of storyline, but also like I think he may have been hurt. Just very poor quality from him. He definitely picked it up by end of the year, and then you always hangs at Wrestle Kingdom as well for great matches as well, Osprey, and so definitely that picked up. But yeah, definitely a down year. Lots of injuries as well. Yo, especially he got hurt. I
Mm-hmm.
think that really hurt the G. And I'm sure we'll get more into that. But yeah, definitely there were some bright spots. Obviously with Shingo having a really fantastic year, Hiromu. But yeah, definitely things could have been bigger, especially in North America with the Wrestle Dynasty show with Madison Square Garden. Like I think that would have been a great litmus test to see where New Japan was, especially from the Elite. Like this would have been like, it essentially was a full year without the Elite. I think 2019 kind of was as well, but still, like having Madison Square Garden and see how that would have sold without big North American names, especially with like being away from Ring of Honor, since the G1 Super, the Ring of Honor stuff in there, but still seeing how it would have sold would have been very interesting. But we obviously didn't get that.
Yeah, Jason, you're cutting in a bit on. I don't know if it's you're too far from your mic or that I can hear like every like 8 out of every 10 words you're saying. So I understood it, but I don't know if you can fix that anyway. But um, to what you said about the North American expansion, I think is very key for New Japan. I think that's something they're still adamant about. And this was a year where they couldn't get into America. And thankfully, they were able to do at least a little bit with this New Japan Strong shows. They were able to have, uh, some shows with the talent they basically had located in America. But
Hmm.
that you're right, that Madison Square Garden show would have been huge for them. I think, and I've said this before on other podcasts, but the Elite leaving New Japan was a huge blow to their American expansion.
Yep.
The reason New Japan was popular in the United States was because of the Bullet Club and because of the Elite and because of Kenny Omega. That Kenny Omega Chris Jericho match really bringing a lot of new eyeballs to New Japan's product. The Young Bucks, obviously huge draws in the U.S. and helping them expand. Even someone like Cody wasn't really a big star in Japan, but in America he was a huge star to the fan base. So all that kind of aspects playing into the hurting their American expansion. And the good news is coming out of Wrestle Kingdom is that we don't know for sure yet, but it seems extremely likely in the coming days, if not the coming weeks, if not the coming days, that New Japan is going to get back on American television, because a key part is that they lost television on Access TV. And I think for people like myself who are pretty closely follow New Japan and will have a New Japan World subscription and will watch every major show on New Japan World, I didn't really. It's hard. You kind of take the Access TV show for granted, but a lot of people got into New Japan because they found it on Access and because it was on their cable TV, and they were flipping channels one night, or they found out it was on and they were free at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, and were like, I'll turn this on for an hour, see what happens. And that did help their presence. It helped people who had never heard of New Japan before stumbling across it one night on cable. And a lot of it was just kind of boilerplate. Like, they just showed, here are 2 big G1 matches that were taped a week ago. And that's how a lot of people watch and follow New Japan anyway. A lot of people aren't watching every single New Japan show on New Japan World. A lot of people are only watching, 1 or 2 matches a month, if that. And having that television show, we don't know what network it's going to be on. They're teasing that it's Purple. That's the only hint we've gotten, that it's going to be on Purple, which,
yeah.
What did you think about when you heard that? Do you have any ideas?
I was checking around on Twitter, seeing what other people were saying. I think the Super J-Cast Twitter account, I think they shared an article about the Roku channel. I guess they're trying to do a big sort of expansion into, the streaming services. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't know if sci-fi would work if want to get back into wrestling. That'd be an interesting move for them, especially as they've been away from wrestling for so long. It seemed to be interesting them come back.
Well, with sci-fi is I believe, I have to look. So sci-fi I thought was owned by NBCU Universal, who obviously
they still are.
Yeah, so that they carry WWE, and I don't know if the NBCU would be happy with bringing on a rival wrestling promotion onto their network. That would be my big hurdle on sci-fi. Yeah, Purple. I was thinking, what networks are Purple? And I was thinking about it. Your audio sounds much better though. I can hear you fine.
Okay, that's good.
That's good. But so the thing about the Roku channel, which I actually saw, I have Roku. I'm a big Roku enthusiast.
Okay.
And on the little the reason I know that is because on the little commercial they showed in the middle of Wrestle Kingdom saying coming to TV in US and the UK, that they had the purple background, and then they had the kind of just like the font of the text was the text, I feel like, from the Roku channel.
Okay.
But the interesting thing about the Roku thing is that New Japan World is not on Roku. And I know that because I have Roku enthusiast. I have Roku in my man cave, and I cannot get New Japan World because it's not on Roku. It's on Fire Stick, but it's not on Roku. So it'd be kind of weird for me if Roku went from not carrying New Japan World to airing a weekly television show. And at the same time, the Roku is a streaming service. It's not. I mean, I know they have the Roku channel that will have movies and stuff that you can watch on demand, but it's not really any different than New Japan World. It's not like people are flipping through the channels and going onto Roku. So, I mean, it could be Roku. There's hints that it's Roku. To me, Roku doesn't really move the needle that much for New Japan in America. Ironically, or not ironically, but oddly enough, during the broadcast, after they kind of done the advertisement, Chris Charlton on commentary said, "Oh, Kevin, this is my bad Chris Charlton impersonation. How do you feel about the color purple? I love it." Which was the hint for purple. Now, when I heard the color purple, I thought of the movie The Color Purple, which famously has Oprah Winfrey in it. And I thought, New Japan is coming to the Oprah Winfrey Network. OWN. which doesn't make any sense because that's not the kind of Oprah Winfrey Network shows, like shows like 48 Hours and Murder Mysteries and stuff like
Sure.
that. Like it's not to me, and it's aimed at uh, people like my mom, like middle-aged women,
Yeah, exactly.
and it doesn't seem like the target demo for New Japan. But I don't know. That could be out there. I don't know. That's just what I got from it. I would be pretty odd if that was found a home. But I think no one thought wrestling would be on Sci-Fi, and it was. So I don't know. It just seems kind of
Yeah,
weird.
yeah, that's the odd part because just the way American media is, it's just like it's like a pseudo monopoly. Like all the other networks are sort of owned
Yes.
by bigger networks, like
There's
ABC.
like
Like there's like a couple big networks, ABC, NBC, Turner, and like et cetera, CBS. But then like all the other subsidiary networks are just owned by them, and so it's really difficult to find like a specific home for other shows.
yeah, they all and become because of AEW being associated with Time Warner, because of WWE being associated with NBC Universal, two of the bigger cable conglomerates that operate 5 or 6 channels, if not more. That becomes political because okay, is NBCU, who's shelling out billions of dollars for WWE to be the big wrestling show on its networks, are they going to pay to get a rival wrestling company on another network? I don't know. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me from a business perspective. And then Time Warner, similar thing. They're paying significantly less for AEW, but are they gonna want New Japan? And of course, you get all the political dynamics between. What if New Japan and AEW have a working relationship? What if the reason the reason New Japan got kicked off of Access was because uh, the company that owns Impact bought Access in part to give Impact a home.
Hmm.
And then when New Japan was like, we don't want to work with Impact, allegedly, I'm not really reporting anything here, but this rumor is that when New Japan said, we don't want to work with Impact, Access said, well, you're going to get out of here because we don't want a rival wrestling company on the network that our owned wrestling company is already on. So um, that's just the American TV deal. We can talk about that when we find out about the actual details, but I do think that's a part of New Japan's 2021. Kind of getting back to what we saw at Wrestle Kingdom. I think the two interesting takeaways I had from it. The first one, and they relate to each other. The first one is this was another with Kota Ibushi winning both titles, and especially with the night two main event, beating Jay White after White had already beaten him to steal or to take over the G1 money, essentially the Money in the Bank contract you get from the G1 to main event Wrestle Kingdom. That all the storytelling that went into that. This was another example of how New Japan Pro Wrestling operates when it comes to pushing talents, when it comes to just taking their time to make somebody so that when they finally win the title and they finally get that big Wrestle Kingdom win, it feels monumentous because it took years and years for Kota Ibushi to achieve this goal. It took years and years for Kota Ibushi. He had to fail a bunch of times. He had to win the G1 in 2019 and lose at Wrestle Kingdom in 2020, only to win the G1 again in October of 2020 to finally win again in 2021. And they did a similar thing with Naito, where Naito basically had to fail a couple times to finally achieve his goal. And it takes years and years to push these talents. And it's so different than basically any other wrestling promotion, that slow burn, that ability to plan out years and years in advance and to successfully follow through with the storylines. And that's to me when New Japan is at its best from a booking perspective. When you have invested years and years. I mean, that I'm trying to remember the Kota Ibushi Shinsuke Nakamura Wrestle Kingdom match for the Intercontinental Championship that I want to say was um back in 2014, I want to say.
Yeah, whenever because Wrestle Kingdom 16, Wrestle Kingdom 10 was 2016, and so that match happened Wrestle Kingdom 9, so that would be
Right.
2015.
Yeah, so 2015, let's say that. Like that was 5 years ago, and that was like Ibushi had this absolutely amazing match in the semi-main event of Wrestle Kingdom against Shinsuke Nakamura, and he lost. But everyone after the match felt like Okay, Kota Ibushi is going to be he's going to be world champion one day. There's no denying it. He's probably the most talented wrestler in the entire company. He's definitely going to win the championship at some point. That was 5 years ago, and over that time, obviously there was the neck injury. Or did he already have the neck injury before that happened? I don't think
I
so.
think
I
I
don't.
think I think for the most part he took a sabbatical, more or less.
Yeah, but
Like
that was
he took time off.
yeah. So that was in, but that was after the Nakamura match. But the
Yeah.
point is that he had this 5 year, basically this journey where if you're like me and a big Kota Ibushi fan, you were waiting, and I mean I was waiting before that Nakamura match because I already was a huge fan of his before that happened. But you were waiting for 5 years for him to reach this goal. And he came so close. He came so close last year. He won the G1. I mean, everyone just assumed he was eventually going to have a match with Kenny Omega for the title and beat Omega for the title, and that didn't
Yeah.
happen. But you just waited and you waited and you waited and you waited, and eventually it all pays off in this incredible 50-minute crescendo of drama that his final match with Jay White was. And I know I liked the match probably more than a lot of people. I've read a lot of reviews where people liked it but thought it was too long and it wasn't like the best match on the show. I thought it was amazing. I was riveted by it. I thought it was incredible storytelling. I came out of it and I was like, Kota Ibushi is the greatest wrestler I've ever seen. How do you feel about Ibushi right now? How do you think about how that story unfolded and where do you see him going in 2021?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Obviously, yeah, as you mentioned before, Ibushi took some time off with that like injury, and you know, he had a spell with WWE for a bit in the Cruiserweight Classic. It seemed very interesting where he was going. But then obviously once he signed with New Japan, like an official contract, because before he had always been like a freelancer, always just doing other things. And so once he officially signed, and he said he signed for life, and obviously I think for one, I think he said that just to spell away any other rumors that he would sign somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That really meant a lot to show his commitment to the company. And obviously, New Japan, they like to reward people who are committed to New Japan. And so that was very instrumental in all that. And so obviously with his story with, jumping to heavyweight at Wrestle Kingdom 9 against Shinsuke, that was just, the small inklings. Obviously, English commentary do a good job at really selling what the coming go away really means, to surpass God. And he considers Shinsuke and Tanahashi his gods. And obviously Shinsuke he
Yes.
left. Like that wouldn't help his story, but still he had a story of Tanahashi and the whole. In 2020, despite it being a year, it was a great year for the tag division, especially with Ibushi and Tanahashi. Like Ibushi was carrying Tanahashi in those
That was the
matches,
story.
and
That
yeah,
Ibushi
exactly that
was the
was
star of the
all
team.
part of the story. Yeah, he was a star of the team, and he was carrying Tanahashi, and that was him. Those inklings of him surpassing his god, because Tanahashi's a bit older. He can still go in the ring, but still slow down a bit more, especially since 5-6 years ago he was on top of New Japan.
Yeah, and like I mean, do you remember like he was? Do you remember when he was Tiger Mask W in
Oh
like
yeah,
2016,
and
2017?
Juice
Like
and Juice was Mask.
yeah, ACH was in as like Black Mask or something too. I don't know if that
Black Tiger.
Black Tiger, yeah, he's not Black Mask. That's a Batman character. But yeah, and that was after the Nakamura match. That was in like 2016, 2017, and I believe he had been like gone from the company for a while, and he
Mm-hmm.
just came back, and he was like in these opening matches wearing the Tiger Mask, like something you would have given to like a young boy who like before he went on excursion. Like,
Yeah, for
and I was
sure.
like, this is a guy who has the potential to be the biggest star in the company, and he is on these opening matches. I mean the Cruiserweight Classic is another one. Imagine if Kota Ibushi signed with WWE after the Cruiserweight Classic, like the way Akira Tozawa did, and the way Grand Metalik Mascara
Mm-hmm.
Dorada did. Like, what would he be doing in WWE right now? Is he
He'd
Tozawa's
probably just
assistant?
be, yeah, wherever Ricochet, that's what he's doing. He's finding
Yeah.
retribution by now.
Yes, right. He's just not enough. So that's a good reason to never sign with WWE outside of money. But in I know we I kind of like didn't plan on talking about the Goldberg incident from Monday, but it's kind of convenient that we did talk about it because you made a good point, kind of talking about the English commentary and the kind of talking about what the Kamigoye means and to surpass God, and Nakamura was his God, and he lost to Nakamura 5 years ago at Wrestle Kingdom, and people think like this is why I personally, again, my opinion, people don't, please don't freak out, like the reason New Japan is much better than WWE and the main difference between the two companies, people will think that it's because of style. Oh, it's New Japan's strong style, WWE Sports Entertainment. That's not why New Japan's better than WWE. The reason New Japan is better than WWE is because New Japan rewards its fan base for thinking about the product and following it for years. And with that kind of long-term storytelling, those accurate callbacks, all of that stuff building for drama in a match. The WWE punishes fans for thinking about it. They punish fans for remembering something that happened a few months ago because it won't make sense if you think about it like that. And that to me is the biggest difference between the two companies. If you're not supposed to think hard about Goldberg and Drew McIntyre. You're supposed to just be impressed by the spectacle of them having a match. You're not supposed to think that Goldberg's promo made no sense. You're not supposed to think that it doesn't make sense for Goldberg to challenge Drew McIntyre. You're not supposed to think that Drew McIntyre was the biggest friend of the Legends and now he's an antagonist to the Legends. You're not supposed to think about any of that. If you do, you're going to hate the match more. You're supposed to turn your brain off and you're supposed to watch Goldberg and Drew McIntyre and say, oh, what a spectacle this is.
Mm-hmm.
New Japan is the opposite. It rewards fans like you and I and a lot of the people who are going to listen to this and a lot of people who like to follow wrestling, who watch the product closely and like to discuss it and talk about it. WWE does not do that. And that to me is the biggest difference between the two companies.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I guess, the other person in that match, Jay White, like they're clearly building a story with him, with that loss.
Mm-hmm.
Cody, that Blade Runner, the first time anyone's ever Blade Runner, and then they're building his story. Obviously, he said he's quitting, and yeah, I think we talked about this before off air. How like New Japan, they're kind of overselling a little bit, but yeah, they're definitely building a story with him.
It's definitely an
trying
angle,
to,
yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely an angle with the way they're selling it. And, it's just part of all that, they're building the seeds right now until until he eventually main events, the Tokyo Dome again, probably either next year or in 2 years later.
Jay White is on the path that Kota Ibushi was on. And
Mm-hmm.
before him, Naito, and before him, Omega, and even before him, Okada. Because
Yep.
Okada, he won the world title very early, but it took him years to have that big Wrestle Kingdom main event victory over Tanahashi.
Mm-hmm.
He failed. I can't even remember the years, so I don't even want to try. But he failed one year, and Tanahashi basically cut a promo after the show saying, "Oh, Okada, you're good, but you'll never beat me. You're a loser. This is why I'm better than you. I'm closing out the show," and blah, blah, blah. And then that set up the stakes for the following year where Okada finally did beat Tanahashi and kind of took the passed the torch to him and all that kind of cliche nonsense. But Jay White is on he's on that track where I think they're clearly playing, like, everyone who, you don't have to, if you go look it up on Twitter or on YouTube, it's on both those things. Watch the Jay White post match promo, which is it's not even like a promo. It's like he's at the press conference and he's just kind of monologuing for 9 minutes, and he's basically like a scene from a movie where he's just completely despondent, he's crushed, he's depressed, he's saying he wants to quit the company, he can't believe, he's just a completely broken human being. And that was followed up at New Year's Dash where he lost to Ishii in a match that on paper you would think he would win because of where those guys respectively are in the company. But because he's depressed and he just doesn't give a shit anymore, he's going to lose. And they're obviously starting, I think, a babyface turn for him. That would be my guess of where it's going. But they're going to play this up, that he was crushed, that he lost at Wrestle Kingdom. And for the entire year, that is going to be the angle. It might last 2 years. He might finally get that win in, Wrestle Kingdom. That would be 17 in 2023.
Yeah.
Right. It's on that long term.
18.
Yeah. And it's on that long term story. And because we've seen New Japan pull it off with Omega, pull it off with Naito, pull it off with Okada, pull it off with Ibushi, I have faith that they are going to do this. They're going to do it properly. And kind of related to that is the Empire, who I think are as a new heel group. People assumed that they were going to have a very successful Wrestle Kingdom because traditional booking would say you got a new heel group, you want to put them over strong so people take them seriously as a threat. Not New Japan. Empire, Will Osprey, Great O'Khan, and Jeff Cobb all go 0-3. They all lose. They go 0-3 at Wrestle Kingdom. And I think that's, again, part of this story, which is that Will Osprey turns heel, has his first, I would say, his huge match since he's turned heel against Okada at Wrestle Kingdom. You don't win that match. You have to lose that match because you can't just, if he beats Okada as, and he's a dominant heel champion, heel guy who beats Okada, what else is there for him to do? Okada's the end goal. This is the start of the story, which is he loses to Okada in his first real big match, big Wrestle Kingdom match as a heavyweight. And now he's got to go through a whole phase, and the entire Empire is going to go through this phase where they're going to climb their way back upwards, and that they are going to be the main event eventually. And they'll eventually, I'm sure Will Ospreay is going to eventually be a IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Barring him leaving the company or a severe injury or something like that. I'm sure of it, but it's going to take time. He's going to have to lose to Okada. He'll probably lose to Okada again before he beats him. But that's the kind of story that New Japan has, and I think those are my two big takeaways from Wrestle Kingdom, which is you got the Kota Ibushi story going, and then you have, the Kota Ibushi story complete, and then you have the Jay White story and the Empire story, which is we're planting the seeds for these guys to be on that similar trajectory to Ibushi.
Yeah, for sure. That's all just goes back to the New Japan booking where like the top guys are still kept strong, though they might lose once in a while. Like Okada, he had, like I said before, he had a very strange summer. The G1, he had, record-wise, still had a strong G1, but still, like, they are still kept strong. Tanahashi, despite him being like a fallen ace, so to speak, he's slowing down. He's still kept strong and right these wins and these important wins, especially in the Tokyo Dome. It tells even more why the Tokyo Dome is such the biggest stage for New Japan. It's like sort of like a WrestleMania type where like, hey, you have to compete on this strong stage, and it's very relatable. You look at like the NFL, you look at these new playoff teams. It's always about the playoff experience. That's always why. That's why this team's gonna win because this quarterback has more playoff experience. That's why they're gonna win. And they do the same thing in New Japan, where like Okada and Tanahashi, they have such a strong record at Wrestle Kingdom. They always deliver Wrestle Kingdom no matter the circumstance. And then that obviously is the Great O'Khan. This is his first ever Wrestle match as the Great O'Khan, and that's why he lost because he doesn't have that experience on that big stage. Will Ospreay as well, he's had a very shaky record at Wrestle Kingdom. He wins, sometimes he loses, and that's why he lost. That's all part of the New Japan booking and really selling these big events and big venues as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Wrestle Kingdom is different. Mm-hmm. Naito won the world title before he won at Wrestle Kingdom. He had a world title run.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But and this might not be a positive thing. Like people kind of dismissed it, forgot about it, whatever, because it wasn't, he lost at Wrestle Kingdom and he didn't really have a long run with it. Jay White is a similar example. Yeah. He's already won the championship before, but he hasn't had that Wrestle Kingdom victory. He hasn't had that big one. And that's the one that ultimately matters. And that's why that event is so big, is because of stuff like that big, like you said, they kind of hype it up like it's the Super Bowl, like it's you got to have big match experience, big, Okada's been here a million times, he's not going to get rattled. Osprey beat Okada in the G1. That kind of set up the heel turn. So he had already beaten Okada, but he didn't beat Okada in the Wrestle Kingdom. And ultimately, Wrestle Kingdom is the most important thing that a wrestler can do. And it's sold like that, and it's treated like that, and it's very consistent. And you end up having that feeling where it's like, okay, Jay White won the title before, but that's not really going to mean anything. He needs to win the title at Wrestle Kingdom. He needs to successfully defend the title at Wrestle Kingdom in an epic defense to really be like, okay, this guy is the top guy. Ibushi has basically been a top guy for the last 3 or 4 years. It's not like he was in the mid-card last year. And, he was in the tag team division, so maybe he was in the mid-card. But you understand what I'm saying. He's been a top guy, but it wasn't until this week where it's like, okay, Ibushi is the top guy in the company now. And I think that's a key distinction to make. And it's because of Wrestle Kingdom, and it's because of magnitude of Wrestle Kingdom, and that people will always remember what happened at Wrestle Kingdom. And WrestleMania for WWE is the same way, right? Roman Reigns was the WWE champion. He had like some totally like forgettable runs as champion until he eventually won the title at WrestleMania. And that was like that was the crowning of Roman Reigns, which has been happened like 5 times now. But the point is that's similar to vibe to WrestleMania, that people know, if Ibushi, and same thing with like legendary matches, right? If Kota Ibushi and Okada have like an amazing match at like uh King of Pro Wrestling in September, people will talk about that as an amazing match, but because of the quality of New Japan, and because of how many events the company has and how many times we see those kind of matches, we'll kind of forget about that. But we'll never forget like the Wrestle Kingdom matches. That's what happens when you have an event that's big. Just like WrestleMania, people will remember a match at WrestleMania that's really good way more than if they remember a match at another show. I think like the Undertaker Shawn Michaels match at WrestleMania 25 is a good example of a match that has become like this, and that's a great match. I'm not want to crap on the match, but has become like the definitive, if you're a WWE fan, the greatest match in the history of professional wrestling. And a real reason is because it happened at WrestleMania, because it happened on that stage, and it happened at the biggest moment possible. Obviously it's because it's a great match, and it's because these two amazing stars. But if you wanted to look, like, I think like you could look at other Undertaker Shawn Michaels matches and say, I think those are better. I think their first Hell in a Cell match is better than the WrestleMania match. Um, all things considered, but because it wasn't at WrestleMania and because that has become the definitive match, people will always look and say that that's the big match. And that's what happens when you have shows this big. It's good. It's good for
Right.
wrestling to have those definitive events.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's also, just going back again to regular sports, like there's tons of great basketball games in the regular season, but
Yeah.
those memorable basketball games are NBA finals or like a conference championship or anywhere in the like those are the more memorable basketball games. There are a ton of great regular season games, but no one really remembers unless you're like a diehard fan of that specific team. And that's the same thing
Yes.
in wrestling. It just all works out the same way. It's nothing wrong with that. That's just how life is in general, all sports as well. You just remember the more memorable moments. Again, that just goes back into why certain title wins are more important than others, or just they feel more important than others. Whether they get are or not is just a different story.
Yep. Kyrie Irving played very well in Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals and hit a very memorable shot, and he's pretty much been coasting off of that ever since.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's a good point. And it's good for casual fans who don't follow the product, who don't even know anything about the product, to have that big event to tune in, that you can say, even people who never watch New Japan Pro Wrestling will be like, okay, I know Wrestle Kingdom's a big deal. I know that the Tokyo Dome is a big deal. I know that it's not like, you can't, even if you're not a New Japan fan, it's hard to people won't really dismiss that, right? They'll know, okay, I get it. They had, this year they didn't, but they had 40,000 people. This is big, big, big time wrestling. It's not, I mean, I think people who only watch WWE might be under the impression that, like every other company that's not WWE is doing like inconsequential business. Like it's
Mhm.
all just like indie shows, and it's like 200 people and it's whatever. And I think it's important to have these kind of events that even if you don't really care about New Japan, there's uh, some respect for the show being that big.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, New Japan is sort of trying to do that with Madison Square Garden as well.
Right.
They set the seeds up for G1 Supercard, and I'm sure they wanted to do that with Wrestle Dynasty as well. They even named a show, and so that probably would have been, Wrestle Dynasty 2 would have happened this year, and
Hmm.
continuing on and on. If assuming they do good business in MSG, but I'm sure, yeah, New Japan's trying to do the same thing for the American audience here and try to give them something to look forward have to stay up all night to watch the Tokyo Dome shows. They could just go to a MSG show, but if possibly.
Random observation: if marketed correctly, I think Kota Ibushi could be a huge star in America
Oh
for
yeah,
New
for sure.
Japan.
Hmm.
He's so handsome. I
Yeah.
just like I see, like, I see on Twitter and social media how popular like these K-pop bands are, and obviously that's Korea, not Japan, but they're popular in America.
Hmm.
And part of it is the music, but also part of it is because teenage girls, young girls are like, all these boys are so cute, and the history of wrestling has always catered towards attractive men bringing in young women. That's like just a fact of historical wrestling. You can go back to the Von Erichs and even before that about that thing. And I just see Kota Ibushi, I'm like, if someone came in and they marketed this guy as like the face of a company and they just had all these modeling shots of him walking around, I don't know. I just see it as just like they got on American TV and like, this is the face of our company. Look how handsome he is. I think they could attract a lot of new fans. New Japan is very popular with women in Japan, even though they don't have a women's division and that kind of stuff. And one of the reasons is because they have attractive guys and they push them. And that's that's not like, it's not like WWE and AEW and stuff aren't doing that, because they do to an extent. I just have the observation. I was like, yeah, this guy's really handsome, man. He's like the best wrestler in the company. I just see him like, if you got those into the right hands, almost if you brought in someone from not wrestling, someone who is I don't know, find one of those music producers, find one of those executives, find one of those, movie industry people that is in charge of selling this to young women, and see what they have, because I don't know, it just occurred to me. Anyway, enough talking about how handsome Kota Ibushi is, which we could talk about all day for.
Well, just to add a little bit on that, I think his association with Kenny Omega and the Elite in the past helps him as well. Hardcore wrestling fans also remember Ibushi tagging with the Young Bucks and All In, and they remember the Golden Lovers. American fans were very invested in that story, even though that was a story that mostly like hardcore Japanese wrestling fans know, because that's mostly in DDT where that story happened. But still, people were invested in that, in those like LA shows. And so I think that his association with them, not anymore obviously, but still his past relationship with them helps a little bit as well.
I would have popped so hard at the Wrestle Kingdom in the Jay White match if he hit the One Wing Angel, or even if he just went for it. I would have been like, "This is the great. It's over. It's the greatest match I've ever seen." I was like, they have to do this. It's so perfect. But there's all sorts of reasons. Maybe he'll do it one day. But I was like, yeah, man, if he hit the One Wing Angel right now, this would be. I would literally, like, I was just watching it. I didn't watch Wrestle Kingdom live. But I would have watched it, like, I would have just stood up in my empty room and been like, yes. But so I want to talk a little bit more about the Empire. And in general, I think 2020 saw New Japan shift. We talked about Tanahashi kind of taking a step down the card. Okada, I don't know if he totally took a step down, but he wasn't pushed in the main event like he had been in recent years. I think now he'll probably be that. Obviously, getting the big win at Wrestle Kingdom helps him in that regards, and he's the kind of guy that can just be pushed whenever they feel like it, because he's already so established. But even people like Ishii, Suzuki, kind of, Goto, definitely, just guys who are over 40 getting kind of phased down the card, and they're pushing new talent. I think they're pushing Evil, though. Obviously, they're pushing Evil more. They're pushing Sonata more. They're pushing. Jay White has always kind of been pushed, so he's not necessarily new from 2020. But I think the Empire, Osprey, Okan, and Cobb maybe to a lesser extent than the other two, but they're pushing those guys. They're like, these guys are going to be big stars in our company. Obviously, I feel like it's not for me. It's not surprising with Osprey, because he's always been pegged as a guy who the company knew could be a big star, and had been a big star in the junior heavyweights, and has now been. It was only a matter of time before he came up as a heavyweight. And I don't really want to talk about Will Ospreay that much, because people have a lot of reactions to Will Ospreay that I don't really want to get into right now. I'll just say that during Wrestle Kingdom, a lot of people on Twitter wanted to remind us that they don't like Will Ospreay, and that Will Ospreay is a bad wrestler, apparently. But regardless of that, what do you think about Okan? Because he seems very divisive. I've heard people whose wrestling opinions I respect are like, Okan is a huge star. This guy is great. He's going to be a major star. There's no surprise. There's obviously a reason he got the match against Tanahashi at Wrestle Kingdom, which was a huge opportunity. And I've also heard people be like, this guy sucks.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's hard for me to tell, especially with the clap crowds, because there's a world where people can make noise, and he's getting like nuclear heat and people just hate him. And that match against Tanahashi is like amazing because the fans hate Okan so much, but they love Tanahashi, and Tanahashi's the great babyface coming back. But with the clap crowds, it's kind of hard to tell. I don't know what to think of him What do you think about Okan and like his potential to be a main event star?
Yeah, I would say I'm in that camp of the former, where I think he is going to be a big.
Yeah,
I've always been a fan of Okan ever since his young lion days as Oka.
yeah,
Like I
he turned heads as a young
root,
lion.
yeah,
Like,
exactly, and you could tell from that moment on. I think they wanted to do something big with him, and obviously they're doing that right now. And I do agree with the former opinion. Like you don't just get a match with Tanahashi at the Tokyo Dome. Like he either they convince Tanahashi to do it, and Tanahashi, the company guy, says yes, or Tanahashi's like, yeah, I want to work with this guy and put this guy over.
yeah,
Like whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I'm a believer in that
they're
opinion.
not giving that spot to Master Wato.
Not yet, not
Yeah,
yet.
but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I contend that they will get that spot Master Water one day. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and so the thing with him is that he's just so different,
Yeah,
and a lot of times people say different is good, and it usually is, but it's not always good. And like just his mannerisms in the ring, the offense that he does, it's very old fashioned. He's doing the Mongolian chops. He's basically influenced by Killer Khan, who was a star in the '70s in New Japan as kind of like a wild man heel. He's doing the headbutts. He's doing like the claw. He's got this. Some people are like really like his outfit. I think it looks like really crappy, and I would like it to change the pants and everything. They like it's fine for like his entrance gear, but when he's wrestling in those pants, I hate baggy pants.
okay, yeah.
I hate when people had like when I hate when Daniel Bryan had like the bootstrap, the boots with the fur on it. I don't know. It just never
Mhm.
looked. They don't look athletic to me, which is I think the problem. Like you would never see like someone playing a real sport like wearing that, and uh,
Sure.
I don't know. But it just I don't know if I want to like him. I liked him as a young lion. I'm actually shout out Facebook friends with Tomoyoki Oka the person because I think I just looked him up on Facebook one day, or I saw a link to his Facebook account on Cage Match, and I just saw him like, oh, it's like actually him. And I just sent him a friend request. Like, because I mean, this is like 5 years ago, and he accepted me as his friend. So I get like if I go to my Facebook feed, I see him talking about like, oh, got a big match at Wrestle Kingdom. And everyone's like, we're so proud of you, Tomoyoki. It's really funny. It's like I'm part of his life.
Nice.
I know I never say anything to him, but me bragging about my connections with Tomoyoki, whose name I'm probably butchering by the way, Oka himself. But like you, he turned heads. He was this, big young lion guy. He had an amateur wrestling background. He just looked like someone who could be a star. A lot of the young lions look like junior heavyweight guys. They're all obviously wearing just the black trunks. They're kind of not made to stand out. But Oka, because of his size, because he was bald, because he had this kind of they put over his amateur background and stuff. He came in at the same time as uh Kiyomiya, the big like
Kitamura.
Kitamura, right? And Kitamura was like,
Oh,
you want to talk about a missed
yeah, it
opportunity.
was the best.
Kitamura would be in another world. Kitamura is like IWGP Heavyweight Champion, or like Vince McMahon signed him to like a $50 million a year contract.
He's the Brian Cage of New Japan.
Yeah, and he's like Brian Cage crossed with Brock Lesnar, crossed with like I don't know, I can't even get Walter or something like that. Like I can't even get into like
And Goldberg. He was doing the jackhammer.
yeah. And like I'm trying to think of like a sports equivalent to him, like as someone who like was definitely going to be great, but then didn't. Um, like people would say like Boston fans would say like Len Bias,
Yeah,
uh,
sure.
or like someone who just like everyone or I was like maybe almost like he's gonna end up being like a Bo Jackson like figure where his talent will be mythical
Hmm.
to a degree, but
Yeah, for
because
sure.
and for him like he got in like a moped accident and broke his leg, and then like when he rehabbed, he just decided he didn't want to do pro wrestling anymore,
Hmm.
which is all of our losses. Uh, and everyone should look him up. You say his name appropriately because I said it wrong earlier.
It's Kitamura.
Yeah,
It's
Kaito. Kaito.
Katsuya Kitamura.
We have the power of the internet. I'm gonna just look this up right now. Yeah, Kaito Kitamura. Unless that's the No, Kaito Kiyomiya is the Noah guy. That's why I get these confused. Kaito Kiyomiya is the Noah guy. This is bad. No, I can't.
Though I will say, um, look up his MMA fight recently.
Oh
He
yeah,
did a K1 fight.
yes,
He did not look good.
yeah.
He looked very rusty,
I think he got KO'd in like um,
very quickly.
Katsuya Kitamura. Katsuya Kitamura. Kitamura. I had to look that up. I'm sorry. I'm talking about this guy like he's like a god of pro wrestling, and I can't even get his name right. But if you weren't watching New Japan at the time, just Google this guy. Image search him. But Oka and him came up at the same time, and I was like, these guys are gonna like the future of New Japan is unbelievably bright. You're gonna have these two big guys, and they're going to be awesome. But to get back to Okan, he went to. I didn't really watch any of his British excursion in Rev Pro. He was kind of booked as like a dominant guy, but the reports I heard was that his gimmick wasn't really over. He was doing the Okan gimmick then, and I think he slowly kind of got over time for Rev Pro. But again, I wasn't watching, so I can't really speak to how over he eventually got into Rev Pro. But when he came back, and he's obviously getting a big push, he's getting put in the Empire. I'm still on the wait and see approach because it wouldn't surprise me in a year if he had to be repackaged because he's just not getting over and that his wrestling style just isn't going. Even though I respect that he's doing something different, it's possible it just doesn't get over. And he's a talented guy that could probably do more than that. But it's definitely he's probably I feel like the most divisive person in New Japan when it comes to people having wildly different takes on him. Because I've heard some stuff like that, like think like, oh, he's got a higher ceiling than Osprey. He's going to be world champion in a year. All that kind of stuff that I just don't really. I can't, it's hard to tell. I can't tell with the clap crowds.
Yeah, for sure. And like he works a technical style. He does a good job using a sambo and judo background,
Yeah.
but he doesn't do it in a very flashy Zack Sabre Jr. or even Suzuki type of way. It's very methodical, and like for fans of Okan, like myself and many others, we appreciate this destruction that he brings, especially post match. Like you really feel like he's beat up his opponent, but for other people, he just does it in such a methodical way that it just doesn't vibe with a lot of people. Zack Sabre Jr., Suzuki, those types, even Thatcher, do a great job at implementing their technical style to a mainstream audience. That's why Thatcher is really big at NXT because like he really does a good job of bringing his technical style and really making it flashy to make it good on television. And Okan, I don't know if he needs to change or whether he needs to be paired with the right opponents, perhaps. They have to figure this out. And maybe crowds returning and maybe their ability to cheer and not just clap but cheer for him perhaps will change opinions. Well, but yeah, I agree with you. It's a wait and see approach. But which for me, I'm excited for his potential.
So, yeah, and I the match against Tanahashi I liked. It wasn't like I hated it. It wasn't like a real like I wouldn't call it a great match, but I was entertained by watching it. But my takeaway from it was when I was watching it was, God, like Tanahashi's just the best babyface. He's so great. He's so good at selling. He's so good at making his comebacks. He's so good at connecting with the audience. Like Tanahashi's so great. I wasn't thinking like, oh, Okan's gonna be a big star. Like, watch out, Okan was great in this match. That wasn't my take. I was focused on Tanahashi, and obviously it takes two to tango, and I think that it was a nice dynamic with Okan as kind of like the larger, fresher, kind of mean-spirited heel, kind of brutalizing Tanahashi to set up that Tanahashi comeback. So it was a good dynamic, and like I'm very interested. He's got a lot could happen for him in 2021, so he's definitely one to watch. And then I don't like really have a ton to say about Jeff Cobb. I thought his match against Shingo was excellent. A lot of people were saying that was their favorite match from Wrestle Kingdom. It wasn't for me, but I thought it was a really, really great match. It was the best match I've ever seen Cobb have. To me, Shingo, I think everyone seems to have the same opinion that I've heard that I've talked to is that Shingo should be like a main event guy, and that Shingo versus Ibushi for the title is like that's like a match that could headline Wrestle Kingdom, and I'd be like unbelievably hyped for it, right? But I don't know if he's ever going to be elevated to that level. They seem like, there's a lot of, politicking going there. He's not a New Japan guy. He's a Dragon Gate guy who came over later in his career. Kota Ibushi wasn't a New Japan guy either. But I think there's to an extent there might be some politics involved with Shingo being as, a mid-card guy that's going to stay on the mid-card. And he might, win some G1 matches. He'll go 5-4 in the G1 one year or something like that. But what do you think about Shingo, like his future in New Japan, can he get to that next level? Because I think most people agree that he's good enough.
Yeah, for sure. I think if New Japan see him as like a reliable, good match guy, like they come up with anybody, he can have a good match. I think the problem with him is that he's with LIJ, and then New Japan, they're really committed to pushing Sonata first.
Yeah.
I think he's first in the pecking order, and like Shingo, I think Naito probably second because I think they can always rely on Naito to carry, go main event a couple shows, and then Shingo's third on that list. I mean Hiromu.
I think Hiromu's
up and up. Yeah, Hiromu up too, and so like he's just way down the pecking order. It's just not his fault. It's just his other stablemates are just higher on the list, and so it's really difficult for him to really get that main event push with everyone else on top of him.
Yeah, it's just, to me, when I watch him, I was like, dude, this guy's like, I was listening to the Voice of Wrestling review of it, and they're like, this guy's the perfect professional wrestler. He does everything well. Yeah. And it's true, he does do everything well. And like, I would have confidence in pretty much every match he's in. And I think with the right push, he could get even more over with the fan base. I think, and so he's one of those guys, and I think what his destiny is probably the Ishii role, which is like, we'll occasionally get a title match. We'll get a big one in the G1, or a big win in the G1. But is he ever going to main event the Tokyo Dome? Is he ever going to win the world title? Probably not. I mean, Shingo's not a young guy. It's different than, when we're talking about Okan or Osprey or even Cobb. Like, I think Shingo's like 37, probably. Might be older than that. So, it's not like he's going to be around for 15 more years, or maybe he will be. But he's not like someone you would really make a long-term investment in. He'd be more of a short-term kind of thing. So he's definitely someone I could see being elevated. Kind of in that same vein, talking about people being elevated. And I think, like we said, this was a big year. 2020 was a big year for trying to elevate people into Japan. What I'm interested in is, and it's kind of flying under the radar, is the junior heavyweight division, which I think has been kind of like all-time. I shouldn't say all time, because there's been plenty of weak times in New Japan, but in recent memory, really, really thin of talent. Part of that is losing talent to other companies. Part of that is, some American talent not being able to come over to New Japan. And part of it is talent, like Will Osprey moving up to heavyweight and Shingo moving up to heavyweight and that kind of aspect. And it just seems to me that if you want to look at the junior heavyweight division right now, you have Hiromu, who is legitimately one of the biggest stars in the company. And then you have Ishimori, who's been Hiromu's rival for basically the entire year. Mm-hmm. And those, to me, are the only two guys who I look in the junior heavyweight division and are established as major top-line junior heavyweight guys who can definitely hold the title. Beneath them, I think you have Phantasmo as like an up-and-coming guy who could win the title very soon, and it would make sense, and he would be established in the same class as Hiromu and of Ishimori. But outside of that, I'm looking at this division, and especially if you look at the tag division, because the junior tag division is kind of like the secondary tier of the junior division. I see a lot of talent that just doesn't really excite me. It doesn't mean that the talent is bad, but I see a lot of veteran talents that we know what they are, and it's not top junior stuff. Yoshinobu Kanemaru, Tiger Mask. Some people disagree. Desperado, to me, is a good. Desperado's a good wrestler. He had a really good match with the Hiromu, but he's not like a guy who's going to be the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion for a year. It just seems like a lot of those guys, and then they rounded out with young boys. And I don't know in that division, like, who are they going to elevate? Who do they need to elevate? Master Wato maybe. Sho maybe. He was kind of Sho didn't really, guys who really didn't do a lot. Master Wato did have a match at Wrestle Kingdom, but I don't know. Like, what do you think about the junior division? Because it feels really thin to me, especially when recent years, when compared to recent years.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, travel is restricted, so you can't have guys like Dragon come in, and obviously he's held the title before, and he's had his own rivalries with everybody, and so he's a legitimate name they couldn't bring in. Uh, um, I'm big on Shell personally. He's one of my favorites in New Japan, but yeah, like he's always fallen short against Shingo, and
They
that was his
don't
big
push.
rivalry.
Yeah, they don't really push him like he's a top junior though.
Yeah,
In the
exactly.
tags,
I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, he's just stuck in the tag division, and he's gonna be out for most of 2021 probably with his knee injury. Like, where does that leave Show? Like, does he get a push? And then even then, like, is it just one of those filler defenses for Hiromu where he can just have a good match with him, but like you never expect him to actually beat Hiromu? And yeah, it's definitely very tough. And they're banking on some other young lines like Ren Narita, whether like he's gonna get called up from his LA Dojo excursion. I don't know if they're banking on that or whether they're banking on Master Wado being a thing. It's just a lot of missing pieces that they have right now.
Yeah, I got to look at who they're elevating. It could be some of those young boys when they come back from excursion. Who's the Ren Narita? I think is, but I don't know. I think Ren Narita might be a heavyweight.
I think he could be in the Best of Super Juniors one time. So that's the only reason I can see him being junior.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I just want to know what their kind of like long term plan is because you also need guys for the junior tag titles. I know those are real secondary and that it doesn't ultimately matter who have the who has those titles, but you need to have guys to flesh out that stuff. And I say like I like Ryusuke Taguchi as much as everyone else, but there's a ceiling on him that he's over 40. This is who he is. He's same thing with Tiger Mask, same thing with El Desperado. Who unmasked himself and now it was back wearing a mask, which was strange to me. But is David Finlay Jr. Is it a lot of this is there's guys who can come in. I think Robbie Eagles is junior heavyweight that they could push.
Yeah.
If he comes back, I think if they decided to do it with the show, they could do with him. It just seems like the division it's taken a beating, over the last few years. I'm looking at I got this pulled up right now. So this is the 2016 Best of the Super Juniors. And just look at this. Look how loaded this is. We got Ryusuke Taguchi. This is Block A. Ryusuke Taguchi, Matt Sydal, Bushi, Kyle O'Reilly, Rocky Romero, Kushida, David Finlay Jr., and Gato. Block B is Will Osprey, Bobby Fish, Ricochet, Volador Jr., Jushin Thunder Liger, Tiger Mask, Chase Owens, Trent Beretta. That's a ridiculous embarrassment of riches of talents.
Mm-hmm.
And if I look at this, the only ones who are still around and wrestling in the company in 2020 were Taguchi, Bushi, Rocky, Romero. Finlay Jr.'s, they haven't been able to access him because he's in the U.S. and he's been on the New Japan Strong show, so he's been out of the picture. Gato's still there. I don't think people really care if Gato wrestles or not. Osprey's not in the junior heavyweight division anymore. Fish is gone. Ricochet's gone. Volador Jr. they can't access because of they couldn't access because of the pandemic. Liger's retired. Tiger Mask just came back after I'm trying to think. Tiger Mask, he had a very serious illness. I don't remember if it was COVID specifically, but he had a very serious illness.
Yeah, I don't think it was, but yeah, it was his illness.
And he's also 50, so that's it's not that much happening. Chase Owens, who they still have, but isn't really a guy who's pushed at all, and Trent Beretta, who's not there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was only a few years ago, and you just look at the kind of toll that different stuff has happened. You got to reload at some point, and not being able to access American talent this year is a problem. I mean, Dragon Lee is a guy who was, junior heavyweight champion.
Yep, for sure.
Before, and he's obviously a guy you could bring in. Obviously, wants to work New Japan. You could bring him in when things settle down, and that will help. But I do think with the junior heavyweight division, there is a lot of development that still needs to happen if you want that to be as strong. And it's really important because Hiromu is legitimately one of the biggest stars in the company. He needs guys to work with. When I liked the match he had against Ishimori at Wrestle Kingdom, and it was very good, and a lot of people thought it was very good. But I was also like, what? I've seen these guys wrestle a lot lately, and I know they're really good, but I would kind of like to see some more variety in what they're doing. I would have been more excited for Robbie Eagles versus Hiromu Takahashi. It might not have been as good of a match, but it would have felt different and would have helped them elevate a new talent. It just feels like they kind of have not enough top tier talent, and those matches are going to become repetitive. And if you want to keep Hiromu hot, and Hiromu's not a guarantee that he's going to stay in the junior heavyweight division. He could become a heavyweight star because he's so over. It would be almost foolish to not attempt to do that. He challenged Evil for the title earlier this year or last year. I want to see a backup plan, or at least more people kind of be developed. I think this is a year where that should be pushed heavily. I want to see somebody win the championship that hasn't won it before. It's probably going to be Phantasmo, but I'd love to see Phantasmo versus Robbie Eagles for the championship at like a big show in Osaka, Dominion or something like that. I'd love to see them, bring back ACH. Once if they're able to bring in that kind of talent, bring back ACH, give him a chance. Leo Rush was brought in for New Japan Strong. Those shows you got. People like Danny Limelight is a guy who they dug up off the indie scenes in Southern California. They've given him a push. God willing, they'll have some sort of agreement with AEW at some point. And AEW's just got ridiculous amount of junior heavyweight talent they could send over. You know how many guys in AEW I would like to see in the Best of Super Juniors?
I mean, just a bunch of guys they can bring in. It just be just go back to 16, like just an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, like how hyped I'd be for Jungle Boy in the Best of Super Juniors. I'd watch every single one of his matches if he was in the Best of Super Juniors because you get to see him in that you get to see a guy in that environment, get to see what he can do in New Japan. I mean, put Private Party in the World Tag League, or bring back Jack Evans and the Hybrid 2, put them in there. Why can't I remember who the Martin brothers? What's their name? Top Flight.
Top Flight.
Yeah, have those guys going. That'll be awesome.
Yeah,
I'll see those guys. They got bring back the Young Bucks could go do it. I mean, do whatever. I think that would be almost the biggest benefit to New Japan working with AEW outside of obviously getting Kenny. It would be to and getting Moxley back. I mean, they already have Moxley. They just can't get him into the country. But outside of that would be such a shot in the arm for the juniors division.
For sure. I mean, I can see it like they spend this whole entire year building up future contenders while Hiromu holds the belt for an entire year. Next Wrestle Kingdom, he loses the title, and that's why he can transition to heavyweight. But then whoever wins the title, they've already been built up this whole entire year just enough to where it's going to be a legitimate big win. They can be like sort of the new ace of the junior division. I can see that happening for sure. And then who that is again. Like I agree with you. Like they're gonna have to spend a whole entire building up this division from the top down. And then just again, I don't know who that is, but it's gonna be. I would expect it to be a big thing next Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah, no, I think that would be ideal, the way to go. Real quick, to wrap this up here, I'll ask you one final question. Next year, who walks out of the Tokyo Dome with the title, or the double title if they're still unified?
Because there's talk of Ibushi wanting to unify the titles, and so with that, I can see I'm gonna say Naito, because I have a feeling that they're gonna do this thing, because when they unify the titles, Okada, his big gripe is that there's two titles. He doesn't want to go after both titles. He just wants after the heavyweight title. The unify the titles again, I can see it coming back into the main event scene. And then for Naito, I think I can see him wanting to go back into the Tokyo Dome, and then he beats Ibushi for the title, and then Okada maybe wins the G1, and then Naito can beat Okada again, but this time instead of winning the titles, he defends the title at the Tokyo Dome, and that's a big thing for him as well. And so I could see it coming out next Wrestle Kingdom with the title. Well, what about you?
That's very logical. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Naito. I'm going to say Jay White. I think this is the story he's on. He had his huge heartbreaking loss this year. Next year, this full circle story. He's going to be a babyface by that point, and he's going to end up winning the title at the Tokyo Dome and walking out with it. I think he's on the same path that Ibushi was on. He's on the same path that Naito was on, and I think that they got the long-term booking down for
Yeah,
that.
I would say that for me, with Jay, I think that's gonna happen in 2 years, not next year. I
Yeah,
think they're
so
gonna really go long term with this
and
and really build up the story.
yeah, and Jay White's like I think he's like 27. So it's not like they're in a rush with him, you know. So he's the kind of person they can wait on that. I mean, Ibushi's 38. It wasn't like they were,
Mhm.
you know, uh, it's not. I mean, he's also gonna. He also said he's going to live to be 150. So they actually have, and he's going to be. He says, yeah, I'm going to live to be 150. So I got about 130 years or so left of wrestling. So when Ibushi is at, you know, Wrestle Kingdom main eventing Wrestle Kingdom 141, I will be very impressed. I will be very. I'll have to eat my words. Of course, I'll be dead by that point, but that's it for tonight or tonight, whenever, this morning, whenever you're actually listening to the show. Thanks a lot for everyone tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Disagree with us, agree with us. Tell us who you think is going to walk out of the Tokyo Dome in 2021 or 2022 now. Oh, geez, that's a scary thought. Thinking about 2022.
Yeah.
Who's walking out of the Tokyo Dome this time next year with the titles? And let us know any other predictions you have for New Japan in 2021. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you guys later.